This week on Late Night with Monica Price, we are investigating if UFOs actually exist. So I'm consulting an expert. His name is Philip Mantle, UFO Researcher and Author, to help us understand if aliens are out there. Philip is an Honorary Lifetime Member of the British UFO Research Association, former director of the same, and is passionate about the existence of UFOs. He has written many books, presented to many international organisations, and continues to publish and present on the subject. Come and join me on Late Night with Monica Price and prepare to be amazed on this fascinating journey into UFOs. Welcome to Late Night with Monica Price, and I'm delighted to say that we're going a little bit off piste this week, and I'm delighted to say that I would like to introduce you to Philip Mantle. Now, Philip is an author, publicist, and he's also a UFO researcher. So we're going to be talking about all things aliens this week. So come and join me. Philip, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Monica. Nice to speak to you.
Lovely to have you on. Now, Philip, there's been a lot of news, hasn't there, recently, just in the recent weeks about UFOs, aliens, various sightings. You know, America's come out and said, you know, that Area 51 is there and they have seen aliens. But before we talk about all of that, tell us a little bit about what you do, because you're an honorary member, aren't you, Philip, of the UFO, what's it called, the British UFO Research Association here in the UK. So tell me how you kind of got started into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, going back to it's sort of a long time back now, my old high school days, I was always interested in all things paranormal. And I don't know about the school you went to, Monica, but the one I went to, after you'd been on summer holiday, you had to stand up in front of the class and say what you'd done during the holidays.
I remember that.
You'd have one little girl say, oh, we went on holiday, or I rode my pony. And what about you, Philip? Oh, I went to the spiritualist church, and wasn't a great one for getting a girlfriend, I can assure you, but that's how it started. I mean, literally, over the road from where we lived was my best friend's grandma, and she used to go to the spiritualist church. So I would tag along on occasion. And then I started reading about as much as I could. And I read one book, it was about astronomy, but it had one chapter on UFOs, basically dismissing it, Monica, saying there wasn't much to it, but nonetheless, that got me interested. So when I left school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, my interest, gathered pace. And of course, in 1978, there was the Spielberg movie, Close Encounters. And then in the winter of 1979, I went to work in West Germany. And I didn't speak the language, so my mum, God bless her, she sent me a box of books to read, and they were all about UFOs. I think she got them on the local market, a box of paperback books. So I read them all. So by the time I returned in sort of April 1979, I was pretty well versed. And just by chance, Monica, my aunt who lived around the corner, we used to live just outside of the city of Leeds in those days. And she brought me the evening newspaper, the Yorkshire Post, still going today. And there was a small ad in it, and it was for the formation of the Yorkshire UFO Society coming up that Sunday in Leeds. And as you know, in those days on a Sunday, everything used to close. It was like a ghost town. But I caught the bus and I went, and there were about 20 or 30 people there. And it had been formed by two brothers called Graham and Mark Birdsall, who put on a presentation. And that was it. I was hooked, Monica, and I've been involved ever since. So 40 plus years, 2/3 of my life, I've been involved in UFO research and investigation.
Now, there's a lot of people, Philip, that will be looking at this tonight and saying, it's all a load of rubbish. It's just made up. It's fantasy. It's films. Have you? And I'm going to ask you, have you yourself actually ever seen a UFO?
Absolutely, seen a couple of things. The first time was in the winter of 1981. There was an area in the Yorkshire Dales, just outside of the market town of Skipton, just above a little village called Carlton. It's just moorland, and it was called, coincidentally, Carlton Moor. And for whatever reason, Monica, we had a lot of reports of sightings coming from this area. So a colleague called me up one night, said, do you want to go up and have a look for an hour? So I said, yeah. So we drove up onto Carlton Moor. It's basically used for game birds. So there's no livestock there as such. There's no dwellings, there's no buildings. And we stood chatting, and it's pitch black. It's about 12:30 in the morning. And then a little light appeared in the distance. We knew there's nothing there that we could account for it. So we jumped in the car. My friend was driving. He used to drive like a madman at the best of times, Monica, but heading across the moors, he was off like a bat out of hell. And at one point, I don't know whether the dry stone wall was down or there was a gate, but you could see right down this little valley, and there hanging in the night sky was something he described that looks like the London Eye, all lit up, a big cartwheel of light, not a little light, hundreds of miles away, right in your face. Wow. And I let out a scream to my colleague, Graham, who tried to bring the car to a halt as fast as he could. We clambered over the stone wall and into this field, but whatever was there was now gone. And so make of it what you will. There's nothing there that could account for it. There's no buildings. There's no aircraft. There's nothing.
Did you immediately think, Philip, that, oh my gosh, that's a UFO? Did you immediately think that?
Absolutely, because I had a working knowledge of astronomy. We knew what kind of aircraft flew over the area. We were self-taught in that respect. We knew what was on the moor, which was basically nothing, and it was also, similar to other sightings that had been reported by people who live in and around that area. So if I ever thought I needed, encouragement to continue, that was enough for me. I didn't need anyone else to tell me that this phenomenon existed. I'd witnessed it firsthand myself.
And you say that, now, of course, you spent almost your whole life, you're an author yourself, and your whole aim really is to bring the awareness, really, isn't it, to the forefront, to make people aware of it there. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the Pentagon have just issued a report, or a preliminary report, I should say, and they basically confirmed that, yes, UFOs exist. Our own Ministry of Defence will admit that there are things that are unexplained in the skies, which is fair enough. And it's only recently I was talking to a colleague, and he said, how long have you been involved? I 2/3 of my life, and it suddenly hit me how long. Yes. But I called the recent report almost like a stone from the sky report, because it wasn't until the 19th century that scientists of the day finally admitted, despite all the evidence, that stones did fall from the sky, i.e. they are meteorites. Yeah. If you look in the sky, Monica, there are no stones there, are there? They're not. But nonetheless, stones fell from the sky. So after they admitted their existence, it was then on to find out, well, where do the stones come from, and how does this happen? Same now with UFOs. We know they exist. We know there's a genuine UFO phenomena there. So now the argument moves on, what is the nature and origin of it? And that will probably continue long after I'm gone, Monica, yes. But that's the next stage, if you like.
Yes. And I mean, Area 51, obviously known in America to be the one that's not known in America, so to speak, but have they admitted it now? Am I right in thinking they've actually admitted that the Area 1 now exists, Philip?
Yes, they did so a number of years back. Initially, the American government, if you go back to the 1980s, never would admit that Area 51 out in the Nevada desert existed. And the only aerial photograph of it was ironically, from a Russian spy satellite. So we knew it existed. And of course, it's where the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber were developed. Who knows what else. I mean, the people that work there, they usually are bussed out from Las Vegas. So that gives you an idea. And if you've ever been to Las Vegas, when you drive out of the city, it is in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
And that's, you head off to Area 51. The land surrounding Area 51 has been bought up and expanded. So I think about the nearest you can get legally is about 20 some miles away, but you can still see it in the distance, and because it's secret, there's all kinds of rumors have come out of there. If you remember when they made the film Independence Day,
yes,
they actually retreat to Area 51, and they asked if they would cooperate, if the Air Force would cooperate with the movie, and they said, yeah, on one condition. They said, what's that? And said, you don't ever mention Area 51 in the movie. So, which was a nonsense, of course.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
but it's...
And at Area 51, Philip, do you believe that there is a spaceship there, or indeed do you think that there's actually, aliens, another human being or another being from another planet there?
I personally don't believe that, but there are those that do. There have been a number of people stepped forward who claim to have worked there, and that we have a captured or a downed flying saucer, a UFO, and that they have tried unsuccessfully to try and reverse engineer it. In other words, try and copy the technology. But there is no hard evidence to support what these people are saying, of course, which is a great shame. I would love to say, that's fantastic. But it's because of the level of secrecy that surrounds the base, you can prove very little about it. I mean, a colleague of mine, her husband worked there. He was a test pilot there. And he certainly never saw anything, or he's never said he did, but, he's never seen anything. But it's a huge installation, Monica, and we'll probably never get to know what has happened there or is happening now.
And what about here in the UK, Philip? Where have the most sightings of UFOs been seen here in the UK?
That's a good question. And what tends to happen is that we have what we call a flap. There'll be an area in the UK or even different parts of the world that for over a period of time will, for whatever reason, and we don't know the reason, will have an intensity of UFO sightings coming from it. For example, in the 1960s, it was the town of Warminster in Wiltshire. They called it the Warminster thing because they didn't know what else to call it. Local residents at first started hearing strange noises, strange bangs and booms. Then they started seeing these strange lights and then these objects. And a local journalist by the name of Arthur Shuttleworth in the local newspaper popularized it. He wrote a number of books about it. In the 80s, in the 1980s, it was an area in and around the Yorkshire Dales. As I mentioned, that's where my sighting took place. Again, why? I have no idea. In the 1990s, it moved to an area called Bonnybridge in Scotland. Again, an unremarkable place. That's no offence to Bonnybridge, but there were a lot of sightings in and around the area. So make up your own mind why that happens. We honestly don't know.
And what about this century? In the 20s, has there been any sightings at all this year or maybe last year? Has there been anything more recently?
Yeah, there's always sightings come forward, Monica. They never, their intensity, goes up and down of how many are reported, but things are still reported to myself, to my colleagues, both new things and what I call new old things. So it'd be something that happened 10 or 20 years ago, maybe, but new witnesses will come forward and add to the data you've already got on a particular incident. So it never stops. There's always UFO sightings. It's just that for some reason, in certain years, there's more than in others. Some people have connected that with popular culture, like film and television and so on. Like in the 90s, it was the X-Files that was all the rage. And maybe that has a connection.
Yeah, and for those of the skeptical ones that are listening to this and thinking, oh, it's just, it's a nonsense, and it could be, as the theories say, it could be Russian spy planes. You mentioned there it was a Russian spy plane who actually first gave us the aerial photograph of Area 51, but it could be Russian or Chinese, or what do you feel that is just, again, another sort of cover up is anybody trying to cover up the fact that there are genuine UFO sightings?
Yeah, I think there has been a cover up, but it's whether there's been a deliberate one or an accidental one. I mean, all governments, by their very nature, Monica, keep secrets. I mean, they have to, it's their duty. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine used to work in a textile mill, and he said to me, "I've signed the Official Secrets Act." And I said, "No, you haven't." He said, "Yeah, I have." "No." I said, "You work in a mill. Why would you sign the Official Secrets Act?" He says, "We make cloth for military uniforms." So we had to sign the Official Secrets Act. It wasn't that there was anything secret about the cloth. They used it for other things as well.
Yes.
So by its very nature, our government keeps secrets. And it's when you have those secrets, it breeds conspiracy theories, cover up, and you can't ever disprove it, because they'll say, "Well, you would say that," but there is certainly I'll give you an example. In late December 1980, there was sightings in and around the RAF bases of Bentwaters and Woodbridge in Suffolk. They were licensed to the United States, so it was US military that were there. It was also a nuclear base, so they had nuclear warheads there. And a number of events were seen over a number of days. I won't go into it in detail, but the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Holt, wrote a one-page report that was sent to our Ministry of Defense and, of course, to his superiors at the Pentagon. When the case broke a few years later, we asked our own MOD if they had any information on it. And they said, "No, we don't." But yet they had Colonel Holt's report and other documents all along. Now, was it a deliberate lie, or was it just the person we spoke to couldn't be bothered to look, or was it, some kind of official denial? We'll never be able to prove any of that. But a few years later, we had Colonel Holt's memo, as it was, released, and they had it all along. So was that a cover-up to begin with, or was it just, red tape, bureaucracy? Who knows?
No.
I mean, I've spoken to other military personnel who've submitted official reports to the Ministry of Defence, and you can't find their reports anywhere. They just don't exist.
It's almost like it's almost like there's a mystery about it, and they want to keep that mystery about it, isn't there? Almost, or it's the other school of thought where they know they exist, but they don't actually want to let us know that they actually exist for fear, really, for panic, or what? What's your thought on that?
Well, the MOD have released all of their UFO files. There's thousands of them to the Public Records Office at Kew, and you can go along. You can download a lot of them online, but you can go along and view them if you like. And personally speaking, when you look at what they've had to say, they only have ever looked at this from a defense point of view, Monica. So people will report things that, if it's not the Russians, then they weren't interested. They didn't go any further. But they readily admit that there are things in the sky that they cannot explain. But they have never tried to explain them either. If they weren't the Russians or the Soviets, as we used to call them,
yes,
they weren't interested. And there's some fascinating reports in there, but that's as far as they've gone.
And why do you think it's suddenly, come to fore at the moment? I mean, it's very much in the press and media at the moment, Philip. Why have we got this sudden interest again? What's kind of
it's built up over these last 4 years. In December 2017, there was a large feature in the New York Times, which was largely a skeptical newspaper when it came to the subject. However, they reported details of a previously secret US Department of Defense UFO research body. It was called the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. Quite a mouthful, but it was funded by the US taxpayer, They spent 20-some million dollars. And the man who ran it, a chap called Luis Elizondo, stepped out of the shadows and said, well, I resigned because I was frustrated we weren't making any progress. And they released 3 videos that were allegedly at that time shot by the US Navy pilots, Top Gun, whatever you want to call them. A few years later, the Navy confirmed that these were the genuine article, and that they were unidentified. This led to the recent Pentagon report that was 6 months only in preparation, and it confirms out of 144 cases, all of which are military, because they are only dealing with the US military, they could only explain one of them. So that's 143 in the last few years that they cannot explain. They went on to say that some of these have been caught on radar and various other equipment, and that videos had indeed been taken. They've hinted that there's more, and they have set up a intelligence-wide network. So now the Army, the Air Force, the Navy all have to report any UFO sightings within 2 weeks. And also the intelligence services have been brought on board, which will be the FBI and so on. And they've standardized the way that they collect the data. So, and that is now ongoing. They've set up what's called the UAP task force. They've moved the word UFO to one side and now call it unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, but they will only be dealing with the military. It's not members of the public. It's very specific.
Right.
And we'll have to wait.
What about commercial pilots, Philip? If they happen to see something strange in the sky, is there a call for them to report to someone like this organization, or are they? Yeah.
They brought in what's called they call it the Federal Aviation Authority. They've been brought in as well. We have the Civil Aviation Authority. Same thing here. For example, earlier this year, there was an aircraft flying over the northern part of New Mexico, and you can hear the voice cockpit recordings, and the captain says, there's a thing gone over the top of us. It looked like a cruise missile. This is in New Mexico in the United States, and he's no idea what this thing is. So he reported it as a near miss. And we've had several such instances here in the UK as well. It's nothing new. I've spoken to a number of pilots, both civilian and military, who've witnessed things. I'll give you an example. It goes back a few years, but in the mid-60s, there was a wing commander, Alan Turner, now an MBE, but he was in charge of military radar here in the UK. His security clearance was as high as it could go. The most secret aircraft in the world at that time was the US spy plane. When it came into the UK to be refueled, he was notified about it. That's how high his security clearance went. However, he tracked 6 unknown targets over mainland UK on radar. He double-checked with other radar stations and Heathrow, all of whom confirmed they had it as well. And I've met him in person. He said to me, Philip, I can give you a list of what these things are not, but I can't tell you what they were.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And he got straight onto the Ministry of Defence. They ordered a full report. And of course, his report is nowhere to be found. But there you go. So it's a fact.
Do you think it's always going to be like that, Philip? Do you think there's always going to be this kind of tendency to cover up or reports to go missing, or will there ever be a time when, because people now, we've got the freedom to see things, to documents, people want to understand and see things more. Do you think that it's always going to be something that's going to be covered up?
I mean, UFOs, quite rightfully, in my opinion, have moved into the mainstream. There used to be what we call the silly season subject. In the summer, Parliament was in recess, the football season had finished. So what else do journalists have to write about? They had to fill the pages with something. And it was usually UFOs, looked at, quite with a light-hearted manner a lot of the time. But now we have a full Pentagon report, we have the pilots have stepped out of the shadows to go on the record. One is a lady, a female pilot, and she's extremely well educated as well as just being a pilot. She's not interested in the subject, but she said, you know, I was one of the witnesses to one of these events that was filmed. And she has a long career in the US Navy. You know, she's a teacher now as well. And she said, what I saw on that date was a UFO. There is no doubt about it. So when you have people like that who have perhaps more to lose than they have to gain by stepping forward, Monica, there's no one forced her, she's done this voluntarily, then you have to sit up and take notice. You really do.
Yes, I can understand that. And for people who want to find out more about it, Philip, where should they go to? Have you got a website or somewhere where, I mean, if anybody's
I was going to say the first place would be my website. I'm a one-man publisher as well, but we have published information from around the world. So that's flyingdiscpress.com. Simple as that. Disc spelt with a K. And you'll find a variety of material, but it's everywhere. You know, the UFO subject is available across whatever platform you want to look at it, including newspapers, podcasts, on the web. I mean, you name it, you can find it.
Well, it's not going to go away, that's for certain. Well, it's been fascinating to talk to you, Philip. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Monica.
I look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And take care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye for now.
Splash.